There's the you're the man. There was the in the hole guy and guys, and then the best was the Baba Booey guy. I mean, that guy I kind of liked.
Baba Booey is never inappropriate. There could be somebody lying in state in the rotunda of the Capitol, and if somebody shouted Baba Booey, I would defend it.
Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, 𝘍𝘬𝘱.
And I'm Tim McGee.
Well, Tim, I hope you had a wonderful Father's Day weekend. Maybe you got to watch
did.
some World Cup, maybe some of a rather uninspiring U.S. Open, and I don't say that only because our picks just sucked. Our guys didn't even sniff the leaderboard. But let's get the show going. Tim, what's on your mind?
Well, I'd like to give out a couple of yellow cards. I'd like to give out two man of the match. The first man of the match goes to 𝘍𝘬𝘳 for the line of the World Cup. He was in the studio with Thierry Henry and Rebecca Lowe. 𝘊𝘬𝘳𝘍 was on set at a stadium. And when Rebecca Lowe said that 𝘊𝘬𝘳 wouldn't be with them, Thierry Henry said it worked or something to that effect. And Ibrahimovic said, "You're welcome, America." There was just an article this morning in Front Office Sports about how polarizing 𝘊𝘬𝘳 is. I'm not a fan, but I don't hate him. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, we touched on this a little last week, but the dynamic has just been unbelievable. Now, it's been entertaining in its own right. Very uncomfortable at times because there's clearly, even though 𝘍𝘬𝘳 normally laughs the things off, and Henry plays it down the middle. 𝘍𝘬𝘳 has no issue kind of just going at 𝘊𝘬𝘳. I think it seems fun. I kind of tune in because I'm now waiting for it. It's kind of has a little bit of that car crash thing to it. I don't know if Fox is loving that. I can't think 𝘊𝘬𝘳 is loving it. I don't feel strongly necessarily either way on him. But here's what we know. He's standing next to two of the most accomplished footballers to ever play the game. Mm-hmm. Like people that would rank in the greatest.
In the top 10. They're in the top 10 of the greatest players of all time.
Yeah.
𝘊𝘬𝘳 may not even be in the top 10 American players of all time.
As you joked with me, I think it was you, by the way. I should remember those things you say, because so many of them are indeed funny, Tim, that he kind of rode that hairstyle he had when he played the game for a pretty long broadcasting career. You know, I see they put up the stats. You know, he was a defender, so it's like you didn't expect him to score at the rate that these forwards did that he's broadcasting with. But it's like his stats are like 9 goals in 1 million, U.S., men's national team caps. So
yeah, but again, he is a defender. You can't judge him by that. He was a very good player for the U.S. on the '94 World Cup team. But let's face it, that team, player for player, in terms of talent, that team is not nearly as good as today's squad. And he has parlayed that hairdo and that success and that popularity into a nearly 30-year career as a broadcaster. He's been with Fox over 20 years. And the criticism is his shtick has gotten old, right? He's very quick to criticize. He's very much a homer. And I think that's true, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think he's put in a situation now which is analogous to being on the pitch when all three of those guys would have been at their peak. It just wouldn't be a fair fight. And the funny thing is that Henry, yes, has experience as a commentator, and I think he's very insightful. Not only does he obviously understand the game, but he is able to communicate what we as lay fans are watching. Ibrahimovic is new, which is impressive. And number two, English isn't his first language. So he's very impressive in that regard, that he's doing this in his at least second, if not third language. I do think there's animosity between the two, certainly between Ibrahimovic and 𝘊𝘬𝘳. I think Henry is, he's as chill as can be.
I totally get the idea that Fox would want to, and as you said, he's been with them for a while. To have an American, because their broadcast rights, of course, are in the U.S., in that grouping. But they're also using 𝘋𝘦𝘤𝘳, they're using Landon, and maybe some others just don't have that experience in the role that they've placed Alexi Lalas in. 𝘋𝘦𝘤𝘳 was a great player, Landon Donovan, great player.
Yes.
They're not going to be on the same page of greatest players as Henry and Ibrahimovic are going to be either. No. But they certainly know and understand the game as well. So I don't know. Maybe the shtick is getting a little old, and they need to think about that for the future in whatever way they cover. But this is a big moment. Listen, overall, I think everyone has to be very excited. And as a fan, I guess, as someone hoping this all went very well, I've been very impressed. The crowds have been amazing. As we talked about last week, the turnout from all the different nationalities to support teams, whether they're traveling in or just coming in to support their community and maybe supporting the U.S. team as well, has been really cool. The fan fests are starting to take off. I'm thinking the numbers are going to be really good. I haven't seen what happened through this weekend. And we have the big name stars stepping up. Yesterday, we're recording this on a Tuesday morning. Yesterday, Messi becomes the all-time leading scorer in World Cup history with an amazing two-goal performance. And then, not to be outdone, Mbappé scores 2 goals and Haaland scores 2 goals. And just, these are amazing players we're getting to witness. And Mbappé and Haaland are younger guys. They have several more World Cups to come through. I'm assuming that Kylian Mbappé will end up passing that record in fairly short time.
If he stays healthy, I don't see how he doesn't. Couple things I would say is, number one, Messi at 38 still does things that only his avatar in FIFA video game can do. But he also, I've never seen such a conservation of energy, right? He doesn't move until he absolutely has to. And that second goal he scored, where he followed up on the rebound, he just an economy of motion to put himself in a position to score that goal. And Mbappé, different type of player, but there's that famous scene in Ted Lasso where Jamie Tart sort of becomes a team player, right? And he's like, don't play to me. Yeah. Play through me, right? Well, France is playing to Mbappé, right? That his goal, the other guy could have easily scored his first World Cup. I forget his name, forgive me, but he wound up scoring later on to get his first World Cup goal. But he passed the ball to Mbappé, which is why France is favored to win the tournament. I had a yellow card earlier. The only player, and we talked about this before we came on the air, who's not lived up to his reputation and his past feats has been Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, they're playing today. We are recording this on Tuesday, June 23rd. They're playing a match this afternoon. We'll see if he shakes out of his slump. All great players tend to rise to the occasion, but at 41, he is, the oldest regular, I think, in the tournament.
Yeah. And we'll get to see Harry Kane again, who had a good first salvo as well. And for Messi, expected to be his last World Cup. I think Kane will be his last World Cup. Ronaldo should be his last World Cup. You said something interesting in that they conserve energy. If you watch Haaland, he sits and does nothing until he has to. They're very, very different players, because Messi will have to take the ball and go. Haaland is just this insane finisher, right? And he's just so physically imposing. Mbappe's first goal, you mentioned his second goal. I don't know if you saw it. He hit a left footer from outside the box that was a rocket, and it took him like 20 seconds. And I was going, how are they not saying that's not even his lead foot? Like it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And and then to see the classic American fans that don't follow the sport at all talk about, I don't understand how they miss the goal so often. Like, tell me you don't ever follow soccer without telling me you don't follow soccer.
It still drives me mad when they miss the goal, because as a lacrosse player, I had a coach once who used to say, if you missed the goal, he'd say one of two things. He'd either say 6 by 6, meaning you should be able to hit a target 36 square feet wide. Or his favorite line was, "You couldn't hit a bull's ass with a handful of rice."
The difference is you have that ball in your on your stick,
absolutely.
and you're controlling it. You're not controlling the ball coming across and trying to strike it.
You look at the goalkeeper on Mbappe's first goal; he was going the other way because he assumed he was going to strike it with his right foot.
Yeah. Anyway, great performances. I think we all wish for continued excitement, and I think the play has been good. And again, what I've been excited about is just the enthusiasm of the crowds. The Norwegian team, leading the entire crowd into the row chant and cheer after was pretty amazing stuff. And you're seeing them take over New York, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, Kylian Mbappé, the only footballer to ever be named after a one-hit wonder by Hansen.
Yeah. By the way, a very great song that a lot of people like to diss that song because it was kind of a little, they weren't a one-hit wonder at all, but they were
very talented young musicians.
Very, very talented, and that song has as much groove. I will go to my grave with this, Tim. That song has as much groove as any song you've ever heard because it features the Purdy Shuffle. We'll talk about that at another point.
Okay. Great, great ear candy.
No doubt. Can we talk a little U.S. Open?
Yeah, you want to talk about Wyndham Clark, who plays out of Bushwood Country Club?
So
friends with Spalding Smells.
By the way, I think I get my predictions right. Unfortunately, they're always like 2 years early when we predict. I did predict Wyndham Clark for winning probably a U.S. Open at one point. I don't know. Anyway, it's the second U.S. Open win.
Yeah.
So here's what I have to say. You're right. And he was a very unpopular winner in that people were actively rooting against him. And I just got to say, people would have been cheering for Scottie Scheffler anywhere. But Long Island crowds, rough crowd. We had Ryder Cup at Bethpage back at the end of last year. And then it comes back. It goes out to Shinnecock, much further out on the island, but some I think some pretty lousy treatment. But more importantly, just a very lackluster U.S. Open. The location might have had something to do with it. Let's face it, this isn't a place that's easy to get for people from, Jersey and even the city necessarily. Well, and there's other stuff going on, like World Cup, I suppose. But a lackluster broadcast,
that's a big part
lackluster tournament, no excitement in the crowd, even at the end when it got really, really tight. But I don't think, even though he trashed a locker room, I don't think Wyndham Clark deserved the treatment he got.
Well, so I would say a couple of things. I think the fact that there was so much other stuff going on, I don't know what ticket prices were for this time. They actually set up a temporary train station near the course. But you're right, it's not easy to get to. It's a summer weekend in the Hamptons, and you have driven out there countless times. I have driven out there countless times, not recently, but the traffic on a weekend starting on Thursday, especially with this work from home, right, is just horrendous. I will say this, and you are a part-time Long Island resident. I am of Long Island, born and bred. We have a term for Long Islanders called a FLID. So for those listeners who don't know what the term FLID means, you could look it up probably in an Urban Dictionary. But those are the people who go to the Ryder Cup and who go to the U.S. Open. And the USGA and the PGA have, taken steps to try to get rid of the people off the course. But I am not one to always stand on tradition, but there is a certain level of decorum that is expected when you are a golf spectator. It's part and parcel with this social media world where people don't think there's any consequences for what they say or do. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, past guest 𝘍𝘰𝘄𝘓, when we were talking to him, he had a great comment about the waste management because we talked to him, I think, right after that. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I wish we could capture what they have there on that par 3 16th, but without the throwing of beers, because that's energy. But that's positive energy. And what I think we're seeing more of is the negative energy. Right. And I agree with you. I think sometimes it's like, okay, come on, it's a sport. You have to deal with that level of adversity. But they were going after Rory again, and I'm not, all for the crazy decorum, but The idea of at a U.S. Open kind of actively cheering against a shot seems a little odd. The guy I picked was Cam Young, and he made the cut but didn't fare all that well. JJ did not have a good tournament to go after his second Open. He played. But I think that Phil Mickelson has had a worse golf week than anyone. And I don't know if you followed the story, but he got kicked out of his own club for basically being a creep, obviously. Mm-hmm. But how bad must that have been for them to go out while he was playing on the course and basically saying, like, you're out of here? And if you haven't followed the story, he apparently had physical, unwelcomed, non-consensual contact with a staffer. And if that happened, it's definitely not the first time it's happened, I'm guessing. I don't know that for sure, but Phil is not painting a great long-term legacy for himself.
No, he has not. I will say this. I remember back when Greg Norman was still playing. If you recall, there was a guy or guys, I don't know if it was always the same guy, who used to stand at the tee box, and after the player would tee off, he'd go, "You're the man." Do you remember that?
Yeah, I mean, people still say stupid stuff, but yeah, the "you're the man" guy.
Right, and I remember Greg Norman teed off, turned around, looked right at the guy, and goes, "Do you realize how ridiculous you sound when you say that?"
You know, there's the "you're the man," there was the "in the hole" guy and guys, and then the best was the Baba Booey guy. I mean, that guy I kind of liked. Baba
Booey is never inappropriate.
Baba Booey.
There could be somebody lying in state in the rotunda of the Capitol, and if somebody shouted Baba Booey, I would defend it.
It's timeless.
Record purse for the U.S. Open. There seems to be an arms war going on among the majors to keep on increasing the purse, which is great for the players.
I'll say this. I think NBC has to do a much better job with this. I'm not impressed with the Dan Hicks and Kevin Kisner kind of lead team. I know Tirico comes in when he comes in. It lacked any sort of punch to me.
I think the NBC, you know who I think they should hire to do the golf? Alexi Lalas.
Well, we can create comparable broadcast teams for every sport, and what that match would be similar to Henry, Ibrahimovic, and Lalas in every sport.
Just to go full circle back to the World Cup, you know what I find really interesting is Rebecca Lowe is on loan from NBC, right, where she hosts the studio show on the Premier League broadcast, which is interesting that they, I guess obviously it's allowed in her contract, but NBC probably looks at it and goes, yeah, one of our hosts is another competing network wants her on the biggest event in the soccer calendar.
That's great.
We're coming up on time. I do want to give one more yellow card to these hydration breaks, or as the Australians call them, drink breaks. And I think, I won't speak for you, I am not extremely well-versed in strategy or tactics of soccer. I've become more knowledgeable over the years, but I would by no means consider myself an expert. But somebody I certainly do consider an expert, Carly Lloyd, I think hit the nail on the head when she said, what you've done is you've turned a game of two halves into a game of four quarters, which is fundamentally different football. Yep. And, I don't have a problem with Fox making as much money as they can. What I do have an issue with is messing with the integrity of the game.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think in theory the concept made some sense given the potential for certain markets having just brutal, we're coming off of Qatar.
Coming off last year's Club World Cup where it was very hot and humid at a number of the venues.
But I agree with you, and I think you strategically understand the game at a higher level than I do. The same, though, I've learned more. I do love the way it flows. But it has really hurt that flow, I think, for sure. And with that, I think we can close out this first segment, take a break, be back with a guest.
It's time for our guest.
We are back, and we are really happy to welcome our next guest. Jim Small is president and founder of Ascendant Sports and Entertainment, a New York-based advisory firm specializing in providing strategic vision for Japanese companies expanding their international presence and helping global firms navigate the Japanese sports and entertainment industry. Before founding ASE, Jim worked for 40 years in professional sports at the league, club, and sponsor level. For those of you baseball fans, you owe a big thank you to Jim and his team for bringing us the World Baseball Classic. He was, upon his retirement from MLB earlier this year, the Senior Vice President of International for MLB, in charge of all the league's global business initiatives. Jim, welcome to the show.
And David, thank you so much. Love the work that you guys are doing and really proud to be part of it. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Jim. We're going to start with you opening the Tokyo office for MLB in 2003. And that happened not long after Ichiro Suzuki, the amazing baseball player, came into the league. We're wondering, why was it so important of a goal for that presence in Japan? And did it have anything to do, was it a kind of an interesting coincidence that it happened on the heels of Ichiro breaking into the league in such a big way?
Yeah, really good question. I'll answer the second part first. It was 100% connected to Ichiro. And one of the reasons for 43 years I worked in baseball. I've been to Cooperstown dozens of times. I'd never gone to an induction weekend until last year because Ichiro was inducted. And I know that I owe a big part of my career to him. And I always tell my kids, if it wasn't for Uncle Ichiro, you wouldn't have grew up in Japan. So yeah, definitely there was a connection. What happened is in 2001, when Ichiro came over, our business in Japan was very, 100% reliant on partners that would do, agents that would work on our behalf for our consumer products business, for our sponsorship business, for our media business. And we knew that there was low-hanging fruit that we weren't getting to. And so my job was to figure out how to open up full-time representation, to have people there. The legal, the tax stuff was all easy. I just couldn't find anyone to run it. And so I worked for a really, really smart guy and a good guy, and is still a friend, named 𝘕𝘕 then, who was running our international business. And we were flying to Switzerland for some meetings, ironically, about baseball and the Olympics, trying to keep baseball in. It was out, now it's back in again for LA. And he said, "Hey, what's up with the Japan project?" And I told him, and kind of out of the clear blue, I said, "What would you think if I did it? If I moved to Japan?" He knows my wife really well. My wife is named Michael. And he goes, "Would Michael go?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." I hadn't talked to her about it. And he goes, "Yeah, if you want to go, let's work on that." So land in Switzerland, wait for Michael to wake up. Our kids are 6, 4, and 1 at this point. And reason number 500, I married over my head. Her reaction was, some degree of like, "Yep, let's go. What an adventure." And so if you ever meet her, you'll know the other 499. So that kind of started this amazing odyssey. It was supposed to be 2 years and turned into 16. And after the first few years, we really started focusing on elsewhere in Asia, and my role developed into an Asia-wide role. And so I'd say for the last 10 years or so, I probably spent more of my time on our business in China, in South Korea, in Taiwan, in India, in Southeast Asia, in Australia than I did on the Japan business, because at that point it had been up and running. I hired some really smart people, let them kind of handle the Japan stuff, and I was focused on other things. So it was a great thing. It was one of the defining things in my life. If anybody has a chance to live overseas, take it, because it definitely changes you and makes you more view the world differently. And that's certainly the way it is for my kids, because they all grew up there. They all graduated high school in Japan.
So, Jim, we have an interesting tradition on this show, probably a stupid tradition, but an interesting one, and one that we try to stick to. When a guest says, "That's a good question," or "That's a great question," and the person asking it wasn't the writer of the question, it has to be acknowledged who wrote that. And that was Tim's question. He kind of dominated on this, and I love the fact that he even, made sure of the point that we were going to reference Ichiro in that, because that came out. But anyway, Just
Yeah, David,
wanted to
he
pass
told me
on.
that
Dave
because
is,
he wanted me to say that. So
yeah,
that
no,
he could get
that's
the
fine.
recognition. Yeah.
It's not surprising
That's
because
Tim.
like I dusted him so bad in that competition last year, but he's already up on me this year. I'm gonna have to like close out strong if I'm gonna.
There you go.
If this is a skins match, I think he would have to concede at this point. We're only in the middle of June. Jim, Major League Baseball's history in Japan goes back nearly 100 years. If you look back at those barnstorming tours in the 1930s with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, they went over with American players to do a series of exhibitions. What I find most fascinating is probably the most infamous or famous player in many ways to come out of those barnstorming tours was a little-known catcher named Moe Berg. How much did you know about that history when you got involved with the MLB in Japan?
So I was going to say a really good question again. So I don't know who asked that. I don't want to pad the stats for Tim. So I'm just
You
going
can
to
stop doing it. You only get one. There's only one an episode. That's the rule.
Good. Yeah, he doesn't need any more help. So actually, Japan has been playing baseball for over 150 years, and
Wow.
It was a Mainer that allegedly brought baseball there in the 1850s, I think. A guy named Horace Wilson. And actually it was after that, about in the 1870s. So baseball's been played there for quite some time. I first went to Japan in 1992. I was the PR guy in an all-star tour, one of the series that you referenced, Tim. And that team that we sent over was loaded: Roger Clemens and Ozzie Smith and Wade Boggs, and even then, ironically, we eked out a series victory. We won 4 games. I think they won 3, and we tied 1. And it just showed, even then, in '92, the quality of play in Japan against these amazing major leaguers that went over. But for that tour, I was the PR guy, so I had to research the history of baseball in Japan and write about it. So I learned about a lot of things, with the Babe Ruth, barnstorming, Mr. 𝘍𝘰𝘊 and starting the Yomiuri Giants and whatnot. I wasn't aware of the Moe Berg thing until Nick Davidoff's book, The Catcher Was a Spy, came out. And by the way, if you ever want a fun and fascinating read, pick that book up. Moe Berg was, a journeyman catcher who had 15 years, I think, in the major leagues. So in and of itself, that was an amazing story. You go 15 years in the major leagues, and I think he only hit like 5 or 6 home runs over those 15 years. So you would think that at some point somebody would say, "Hey Mo, maybe you should focus on other things besides baseball." But he stuck around a long time. He spoke several languages. He had a degree from Princeton. He ended up getting a law degree from Columbia, I think. And he went on one of these tours to Japan. And there's a side note. As I said, he was a linguist expert, right? He spoke all these different languages. So he taught himself some Japanese. In those days, they would take a month and a half steamer ship from San Francisco over, right? So he had plenty of time to work on his Japanese. And so the story goes that they got to Tokyo, and Babe Ruth was harassing this geisha that was serving them in a restaurant, and kind of like getting a little handsy and things. So Moe Berg wrote on a slip of paper in something called katakana, which is the phonetic language of Japanese, something. And he says, next time he does anything to you, you read this. She goes, okay, and puts it in her obi, and sure enough, Babe Ruth kind of gets all handsy again, and she pulls out the piece of paper and opens it and I won't say the exact words, but it was "F you, Babe Ruth." So he had a sense of humor. But on that trip, he ended up going to St. Luke's Hospital, which is actually still there in Tokyo, and filming. He had one of those early cameras, right, and just showing Tokyo Harbor and Tokyo Bay and whatnot. And then once the war broke out, he actually gave that footage to the U.S. government, to help them in strategically and where to bomb Tokyo. He went on to join the OSS, and amazingly was given an assignment to go to Zurich, Switzerland, to listen to a speech by this guy Heisenberg, who was the German father of the atomic program. And if he thought that they were close to the bomb, he was supposed to pull out a gun and shoot Heisenberg and then bite a cyanide pill. He didn't think they were close. By the way, if I was in that situation, I was like, no, they don't have a bomb. No. But he was right. They weren't close to a bomb. So, but that connection to your point of Japan and the United States through baseball has been there for, over 150 years. And there's a phrase, somebody in Japan once said that baseball is so perfect for the Japanese culture. If the Americans didn't invent it, we would have, because it is all about sacrifice, right? It's the timelessness. It is, my kids played baseball on a Japanese team. My oldest played for several years, and you bow when you go on the field because the field is sacred. You bow after, you bow to the umpire when you go up. After the game, you bow to the other team, to the other team's coaches, to your coaches, and to your fans, right? It's just, there's so much respect, and it's the way the game, I think, should be played, and historically, very, very significant Japanese culture.
Yeah. I just want to second that recommendation for the book. David, you can skip the movie with Paul Rudd. It's not very good.
Agreed. 100%.
But the book is outstanding.
Yeah.
Yep.
Will do. You helped found and bring to life the World Baseball Classic in 2006. I think it's an event that anyone that even likes the game at all would say this is just an absolute. It's like it's almost emerged as its own jewel event, right? In that we're not too far away from Major League Baseball's All-Star Game. Take us through a little of that, and mainly, did you expect it to capture what it has? Because I think I can speak for Tim on this. We were glued to it, with this last run and the Venezuela-U.S. game to kind of close it out. It's just really a remarkably fun event.
Yeah, thank you. So the WBC, like everything else that's big, there's generally not one person that's responsible, but there are a number of people that, if not for them, it never would have happened, right? And so the idea of having a true world championship of baseball had been out there a long time, right? And really started under, I think Peter Ueberroth, when he was commissioner, talked about it. But there are two guys that kind of acted on that in the late 90s. A guy named Tim Brosnan, who was running international, or running at the time international, then it ended up becoming, running all of the business for Major League Baseball. And then Paul Archie, who I mentioned earlier. And it was really, if not for them and others, Rob, Manfred, played a role, but those two were the drivers of it. And then I was very fortunate. I'd gone to Nike, and I came back in '98 and worked with Paul, because Paul was running international at that point, on the first business plan. And so we knew that all of us had been to baseball games in Caracas and Santo Domingo and Taipei and Seoul and Tokyo and Osaka and in New York and in Los Angeles and Boston, right? So when people ask us that question, and I talked to Paul about this recently, are you surprised at where the WBC is? I'm really not, because that was something that we envisioned back at the beginning, right? Before there was a WBC. And then actually we saw it. Proof of concept was in 2006, when everywhere except the United States, right? We played in Japan, and it was from the beginning, from the get-go, people just embraced it. And the beauty of the World Baseball Classic, and something that we have been missing out on, is the world loves country versus country competition, even in the United States, right? I joke that, probably, unless it's your kids swimming, nobody's been to a swim meet, a professional swim meet, but everyone knows who, Michael Phelps is and Mark Spitz, right? Because they represent the country, right? And we're the only country in the world where a club versus club competition is the number one, most viewed sporting event, right? The Super Bowl. Everywhere else, it's a country versus country. It's FIFA World Cup, or it's the Olympics, or if you're a cricket fan, it's the Ashes, for the UK and Australia. So we knew that if given time, that the WBC would be something special. And it just took us a while. And we had that momentum in 17 because the U.S. won, and we really saw things start to change and start in terms of the U.S. perspective from our fans, from media. We had Fox come back in and be prepared to do the 2021 event, ended up doing the 23 because we had to cancel 21 because of COVID. So you really started seeing that pick up. And then the 23 event was just, a springboard, right? And it was my idea to have Trout and Ohtani at the end. So I'll take credit for that one. But that catapulted us into the 26. So now the WBC, to your point, thank you for saying that. I agree with you. I think it is a jewel event. There is so much interest in it. There was so much interest in cities competing to host the WBC, which we hadn't seen before. And I think the WBC is poised to springboard into the next, into the next level.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Tim, before we ask the next. I think it's always nicely revealing to see how much the game is played in other parts of the world to a really high level. Now, there's some people playing in other countries that could have been playing, say, on the U.S. team. There's a little bit of that. But we all know Central American, South American, Caribbean countries obviously are super, super strong, and they prove that out. What is the percentage, by the way? Do you know that offhand of players in MLB that are from outside of the U.S.? Current one.
26%.
Yeah.
And so you're right. And that's major and minor leagues together. And to your point, it's the least talked about benefit from the WBC, but to me, it's the most important benefit, is what the WBC does in these other countries. And I'll give you a perfect example. 2023, the Czech Republic beats Spain 3-1 in Regensburg, Germany, right? After getting blown out in the first, in the preliminaries, the elimination game, they went 3-1. And that changed the arc of baseball in that country, right? Because now they go to Tokyo, they win a game against China, right, to qualify for the next WBC. So they have this cycle of basically about 4 or 5 years that they are in the World Championships. Now, every player on that Czech team was Czech, except for one. There's one Czech American. Everyone else was Czech. They had all played either pro ball in the United States or college ball. The guy that hit the home run against China to win it was an all-conference first baseman at North Carolina State, right? But born and raised in the Czech Republic. And so what happened is, by them winning and bring people in the Czech Republic, baseball is a small sport there, but people there know World Championships, right? And so they're like, oh, wait, our team is in the World Championship, right? That's cool. So it got so many benefits. More government funding, right? From the government to Czech baseball, which they're spending on getting bats and balls in kids' hands. This last tournament in 26, it was for the first time ever on terrestrial or main, over-the-air television. First time baseball's ever been on there. So that is the benefit of the WBC that we're going to see in 20 years and in 25 years. There in Italy was, I think another example this year, making it to the Final Four. By the way, they didn't even qualify for the Football World Cup. They made it to the Final Four, and some of those players were Italian, right? One of the starting pitchers pitches for the Angels, and he's from a little town, I think near Grosseto in Italy. And so there are kids. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal in Italy. Even though a lot of those were Italian Americans, it still said Italy, right? And so there are going to be 20 years from now, kids that are playing at a high level that said, yep, I got turned on to baseball because of the World Baseball Classic, or my dad did, and that I was born with a baseball in my crib, right? So that's the long-term benefit that we're going to see years to come.
So Jim, you recently retired from Major League Baseball. Congrats.
Graduated, Tim.
Graduated, sorry.
Graduated on.
Nearly 40 years in sports. It's not over. The next chapter is beginning. We'll talk about that in a minute. But looking back at your time with Major League Baseball, what were some of your proudest accomplishments? And follow-up to that is, what were some of the biggest changes you've seen in your time with the league in the global nature of baseball? You just mentioned, the benefits of the World Baseball Classic, but would love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
So I just talked to somebody about this recently. We were looking back at our careers, and we both agreed on one thing, and hopefully you guys probably agree as well in your own careers. The first year or two were, for me, spectacular, right? I was an intern with the Royals, but then that turned into a full-time job with the Cubs, and being able to, at 23 years old, travel around the National League with the Chicago Cubs was just so heady. And I'm not necessarily proud of that. That was just something an opportunity I was given, but it was the most memorable time of my career because it was all so new. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what, like, it will be off days and I'd still go to Wrigley Field because, like, why would you not? They gave me the keys to Wrigley Field, right? So that was a really special time in terms of things that I was able to be a part of. That was really special. Obviously, building out our business in Japan was important, but I was able to work to help grow baseball and start the growth of baseball in China, right? So we opened our first office there in 2007, and when we did, there were about, according to the government there, about 300,000 active baseball players, right? So people that play more than once a week. There's now 9 million and counting, right? And so to have been able to play a part in that growth, working closely with some really smart people that we hired and put there, and with the government there, would be a great, something I'm proud to be a part of. And then obviously the other one is the World Baseball Classic, and being able to be there from the beginning, to be able to work and be at every World Baseball Classic, and hopefully leave my imprint on it to make it better than it was. And I know this, may sound corny, working side by side with a lot of really smart people, to build it was a life's work, right? So that would be the stuff that I remember the most. How things have changed on the international side, there's no doubt the quality of play around the world is higher than it ever has been. And I look at a couple litmus tests for that. One would be spending time in Europe and going there in the early 90s. I think my first time going there for baseball was in 1992 to what was then Czechoslovakia and to a few other places. And seeing the quality of play then, there were, if you played baseball at that time, you probably weren't a good enough athlete to play soccer or basketball or track and field, right? Now, baseball is a pathway, and you're seeing places like France that are like, there are the starting third baseman for University of Arizona and the four starting pitchers in the rotation for my Kansas Jayhawks are from France, right? From the academy in Montpellier. So to see that growth of the quality of player, and then understanding that drives business, right? You can't have a business if you don't have a sport, right? That's the nature of what we do. And so that's really important. The more quality players we get, the more bats and balls we put in kids' hands, we know that will translate into a bigger business opportunity. So I think that's been the difference, is that you can go to most countries that play baseball now. I'd say at least, let's say 40 countries I could pick to say, yep, there's a guy there that could play D1 baseball or has signed a minor league contract. And that's the biggest difference.
I just realized something. You were with the Cubs at a pretty cool time for the Cubs.
Yeah, 1984.
I have one of the most significant moments in my life as a sports fan happened when I just moved to Chicago. I was the assistant SID at DePaul, and my first day on the job, my boss, a guy, Ray Stallone, who helps us get guests all the time.
I tell Ray, I said hi. I remember Ray.
So Ray says, I have 2 tickets to Wrigley today. I'd never been to Wrigley. I grew up watching baseball at Veterans Stadium. I walked in and I felt like that opening scene from the Wizard of Oz when she goes out and it's all in color now.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. I fell in love. It was love at first sight. Yeah. I've been a Cubs fan ever since.
Yeah.
And it's my favorite place to be.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and
it.
you were, I'm sure you were there that day.
Yes, I remember Ray, and I worked for 𝘊𝘠𝘤𝘢𝘊𝘠.
Yeah.
𝗍𝘬𝘊𝘠 was the
Yeah.
head of PR then. But Ned is one of my closest friends, and
Yeah.
he was in my wedding, and he was a boss that turned into a great friend, and then he had a great career as the GM of the Dodgers. And then I was just ecstatic when he accepted a position as the GM of the Italian team for the WBC.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to work together one last time in March. So that was special for me.
Well, I ended up doing, because I moved on to the sponsorship stuff and did a fair amount of stuff with 𝘊𝘠𝘤𝘢 and John McDonough and stuff during their time there. Anyway, all right.
David, before you, when you sold Jimmy was there during a famous time, I thought you were referring to 𝘍𝘢𝘢𝘢's outburst after the
That
game.
was my first day in 1983 as an intern.
The best, the greatest rant of all time, in my opinion.
Yep, 100%. So, do you have time for a real quick story?
Sure.
So that was my first day with the Cubs. A year earlier, I started with the Royals, and my job was first day of baseball. My job was to go down and get the lineups for both teams. And a guy named 𝘊𝘬𝘢𝘢, who was the assistant PR director, said it's just very simple. They'll put the lineup outside of the clubhouse, right, or the manager's office. Just write it down, they come up and type it up, give it to the media. Got it. So I go down. Dick Howser was the manager for the Royals. Its lineup is right where it's supposed to be. I write everything down, and I go over. We're playing the Orioles, and Earl Weaver is the manager for the Orioles. So I know Earl Weaver's reputation at that point. So I go in, I look, there's no lineup on the outside. So I kind of sheepishly knock on the door, stick my head in, and I go, excuse me, Coach Weaver. And I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I remember this perfect. He had a tee on, and he has these half glasses on. He's doing a crossword puzzle. And he looks up and he goes, yeah, who the F are you? And I go, I'm Jim Small from the Royals PR. And before I could get out what I was there for, well, no, I did. I'm sorry. I did say, I need your lineup. And he looks up and he goes, my lineup? You want my lineup? You come in here 3 hours before an effing game and you ask me for that line. I don't care if you're the king of effing England. Get the hell out of here, right? So he's yelling at me and walking me right back into the clubhouse. And I turn. Every player's looking at me, and I make eye contact with Jim Palmer and Ripken and Eddie Murray and freaking Dennis Martinez, who had become the president of Nicaragua, right? And Cal Sr. was the third base coach, and Earl goes, hey, Cal, get this kid out of here. He wants my lineup. And so Cal Sr. grabs me by the elbow and just bum rushes me. Get out of here, kid. Just literally throws me out of the clubhouse. I'm 21 years old. I'm going to burst out crying. Door closes. There's an explosion of laughter. Door flies wide open, and Earl goes, I'm just effing with you, kid. What do you need? Come on in.
Yeah, that's classic.
What I learned that day, I said, well, first of all, he's not coach. He's not Coach Weaver, right? He's Skip, Earl. Hey, you. Hey, where's your lineup? Your lineup's supposed to be out. That would have caused no problem. He was just, oh, yeah, sorry. You give me the lineup. But he knew he had fresh meat. So I learned a valuable lesson. So those are my 2 first days of one for the Jim Royals.
There's no doubt that both Tim and I, as you were telling that story, were actually visualizing Earl doing it, both physically, the way he looked, the way he said it, because we've all seen those. And if there was dirt on the ground, I'm sure he would have kicked dirt on your shoes.
And he had to, Jim, he's
not
a tall
guy.
guy. You are. So he has to look
up to me, but it did not matter.
He was shorter than every umpire. It didn't matter.
Exactly. And I thought I had the shortest career in the history of baseball.
No,
right? It's 3 in the afternoon of 4 in the afternoon of my first day.
That's awesome. Okay, let's look to the present here. Tim mentioned it a little bit in the intro in terms of the focus of Ascendant. Tell us what you're up to, the type of projects that you're really looking forward to working on, and then any other activity you have going on that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Absolutely. So I am so fortunate, to be able to start this company and to really help people that I care about. One of the good things about being in this business so long, as you guys know, is you meet a lot of really cool people and you get to work with them. And so that's my goal is to help people I care about and that I want to do business with. And so the first one, everyone told me, take the summer off and then start your advising work in the fall. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I went comically in the other direction. I left Major League Baseball at 5 o'clock on May 1st. Went to 𝘧𝗏𝗏𝘠𝑔's and 6:30 signed my first client, which is a Japanese company called 𝘎𝘭𝘰𝘣𝘢, and they're the holding company for, they're a media organization, they're a sports and entertainment organization, but they also own the Tokyo Giants baseball team. And so my work with them is really to help them with the big project they have. They're going to build a $2 billion sports and entertainment facility and a new stadium for the Giants in Tokyo. So that's really exciting to help connect them with, best in practice stadiums in the United States and in Europe, and as they fact find and learn more and put that into what will be the greatest, sports facility, not only in Japan, but possibly in Asia, right? So I'll help them on that. They're looking to build out a business to sell Tokyo Giants products here in the United States, potential getting on television here. So, and again, I've worked with these guys forever. And 𝘎𝘭𝘰𝘣𝘢 in Major League Baseball, Tim, to your point earlier, have had a relationship since the 1930s. 𝘎𝘭𝘰𝘣𝘢 was the promoter of that, I think, 1936 or 1934 first tour with Babe Ruth. I did not work that event, surprisingly, in case that comes up. But they've been a partner for us for a long time. So I'm doing that. I'm also ready to. They're going to announce soon. I'll be working with a baseball team in the China League. Can't tell you which one yet because they're planning an announcement soon, but they're building out a new professional baseball league in China, and helping them, again, best practices, from a marketing perspective to the extent from baseball operations and building out, again, the game in China. I've got some irons in the fire for potential sumo matches here in the United States, potential kind of mini league in Hawaii. So I got a lot going on. And then I'm also going to be helping out, a guy named Jeffrey Pollock. Do you know Jeffrey from the University of Massachusetts?
Sure.
Yeah. So
founder of World Series of Poker.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Founder of
and one of the founders of
Sports
SBJ.
Sports Business Journal.
SBJ, and commissioner. I think he's a serial commissioner. He's really kind of led a lot of organizations.
Yeah, he was at XFL for a bit. And,
Yep. So working on some things with them and trying to help them out on to any way I can to kind of share the stuff that I've learned. So got a lot going on, but as long as it doesn't interfere with hitting a golf ball and catching a fish and visiting with my kids and my wife, then I'm all good.
Okay. Before we let you go, Jim, we have 2 questions we ask all our guests. So here goes. First one is,
Where'd your career get started? Where'd you start it?
So I was, as I mentioned, proud graduate of the University of Kansas. Although I grew up in Boston, I was probably the only kid from Boston to go to school in Lawrence, Kansas. I was a journalism major and worked for a paper out in Western Kansas called the Salina Journal. And I was covering KU sports and then writing a story, and it saved, 𝘍𝘁𝗎𝗍, who was the editor, from driving the 4 or 5 hours, whatever it was, to Lawrence. He assigned me to go in 1981 to cover a Royals playoff game because Lawrence is very close to Kansas City. And so I went, and I'm sitting up in the press box, and a guy named Mike Swanson is sitting next to me, and he's a KU guy, and he is the intern for the Royals. And I go, Swanee, what do you do? And he told me, and I was like, that's cool. And he goes, well, I'm leaving in the fall. You should apply for it. Swanee went on to basically the same, probably longer than me. He was the PR director with the Padres and the Diamondbacks, and then ran the communications with the Royals forever. I applied for that job and got it. And my first job in Kansas City literally was bottom of the barrel. Keith Creel got sent down to Omaha. I'd drive him to the airport to fly from KCI to Omaha. I would open players' mail, just do whatever. And then that led to an opportunity. I just, took that and put it out the next year to, I think I sent like 20 letters to different organizations and got two offers. Fortunately, one was in Chicago, where my parents lived. So had a place to stay. So I worked for the Cubs in '83, and it was the 𝘍𝘰𝘶𝘳 day. And then that just kind of launched me. And so the first half of my career was spent in public relations. I switched midway through because I wanted to work in business development. So I got my MBA. And then the second half of my career was spent in business development. So
Cool.
very lucky.
And the last question, what one piece of advice would you have for a young person looking to break into the sports industry?
Can I give you a couple of real quick ones?
Of course.
Because they really are dependent on each other. So the first and foremost thing is, don't worry about having a destination. Just have a direction, right? Because you don't know. Like, there's no way that I could have known that this was my destination. And so don't worry about the destination. Just have a direction. And if you like international sports, then okay, then that's your direction, and then see where it leads. Two is, don't just, and I say this to my kids all the time, life is about a series of doors. Knock on every one, right? And the one that opens, look in to make sure there's not a sinkhole there, but have the courage to walk through it, right? And then there'll be another set of doors, and knock on it. That you have to focus on that yourself, and find those opportunities and knock on those doors. And then the third thing is, people say follow your dreams, right? Realistically, that's I don't know if that's the best advice, right? Because my dream was to pitch for the Red Sox, right? It was never going to happen. I said, I don't know, Tim, I told you this. I thought I was a really good pitcher because wherever the batter held the bat, I could hit it with the ball, right? So that's not gonna land me in the major leagues. Instead, focus on what you're good at, right? And when you're in college, and even some kids before, you kind of know what you're good at. You kind of know what things work for you. And are you a STEM person? Are you a communication person? And then just dive into that, because if you're good at something, you're probably going to be happy and like it, right? And if you're happy and you like it and you work hard, you're probably going to be successful. So to me, that's a more logical pathway. And if that matches up, so going back to me, my dream was to pitch for the Red Sox. It was not good enough. What I was good at has led me into a 43-year career in baseball, right? So I think those are the three things that I would just, and I tell everybody that, including my kids, just, those three things are really important.
Great advice. Jim, we can't thank you enough. I would say taking time out of your busy schedule of golfing and fishing. But it looks like Ascendant is off to a great start. So we know you're going to be very busy with that. So congratulations. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Tim, David, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and can't wait to stay in touch.
We are back. Thank you again to Jim Small, formerly SVP of International at Major League Baseball, now the founder and president of Ascendant Sports and Entertainment. What a great guest, David. So now is the point in the show where we take a look forward. Shout outs, things we're looking forward to, any corrections we might have. What are you looking forward to?
A couple shout outs quick. Linda Cohn, almost 34 years at ESPN, is retiring from ESPN at 66. She will go down as, I think, not only one of the greats of SportsCenter anchoring, but also because as a woman in a largely dominated by male field, will be recognized as a great pioneer to open up not just anchoring roles, but also play-by-play and things like that, as she was very active, particularly with the NHL. Blockbuster trade in the NBA that I think may shake some things up. I like to almost think that Giannis Antetokounmpo is kind of like a past guest because we mention his name and show off how we pronounce it so much, but we did have...
You did that very well.
I did. I worked on it this time. Past guest Peter Fagan, the former president of the Bucks, we talked about his impact, and he will have a big impact going to the Heat, and how that shakes up things in the East will be an interesting story to follow. Real quick also, and I think we'll talk about it in the future, what NASCAR is doing with their street races is pretty impressive. Ben Kennedy, one of the top management folks at NASCAR now and the developer of a lot of these new ideas, is really bragging about how well this San Diego event did, with 67% of the ticket buying audience never having gone their first ticket in NASCAR. I find that a little hard to believe, I'll be honest, but apparently fans from all 50 states represented and multiple countries. So they have something going with this. The race was pretty interesting. SVG did not win because he got involved in a wreck. But I do want to say that my favorite former F1 driver, Kevin Magnussen, who I got to work with quite a bit, he was in this race racing on with SVG's team for Trackhouse on their Project 91. And this is a really cool thing that they're doing, and I think very smart for the sport, where someone comes in and drives that 91 car, which SVG, I think, was the original person to run it, that might have some good fortune at some of these type of races. Kevin is a F1 driver. He did fairly well, but he got into a massive incident with a regular, Noah Gragson, and they got into a huge fight. And for anyone that is a fan of Drive to Survive, they may recognize or may remember the famous Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, where he says, "Suck my mate" to Nico Hülkenberg. Well, he got in a face-to-face FU bout with Noah. I think Kevin was in the right on this because Noah was riding him the entire race, and Kevin finally punted him. It's NASCAR. Shit happens like that. So I'm psyched about Kevin showing up in NASCAR and racing like a NASCAR driver should.
Just to close that out before I get to my stuff, it looks like Chicago Street Race might be back on the schedule next year.
Yeah, just a different weekend.
Yeah. Hopefully better weather.
Yeah.
So I've got three things. They're all interrelated. They all have to do with the Knicks. Number one, I'm looking forward to the NBA draft. We'll see if Cameron Boozer goes number one or whether it's another one of the great players in this draft, A.J. Debinsa, Darius Acuff Jr. from Arkansas, Patterson from Kansas. But it's going to be great. News last week, James Dolan announced on the Craig Carton show that the Knicks had accepted an invitation to the White House. He's friends with Trump. I certainly understand him accepting that invitation. What I'm looking forward to is seeing how many of the players actually participate in that visit. If they do show up, it will be the first time an NBA team has attended the White House since Trump took office in 2017. Teams did go when Joe Biden was in office. And the third thing,
I was just going to add, I mean, it was kind of typical Dolan making that mention right before the day before the parade. Why change the vibe again? He kind of did it with the way it was all handled with the visit from the president in Game 3. Anyway, I just thought that was a little weird that he felt the need to do it. But the parade ended up, I know a lot of the outsiders are saying the parade was just, like a big problem. This city is so overjoyed by that Knicks win. So
yeah, he made a jerk of himself when he made comments to the audience at City Hall too. So I mean, you can use whatever animal sort of fable you want, right? You can talk about the leopard and its spots. You can talk about the tortoise and the scorpion crossing the river. He is what he is. Which leads me into my last point, which is there is a class action suit against Madison Square Garden. Apparently, personal information of over 20 million people was released on the dark web, apparently or allegedly because of the biometric and scanning techniques that the Garden uses when people enter to go to a Knicks game or other events at the venue. You'll recall there was a point in the not too distant past where they used facial recognition to ban lawyers who happen to be working for law firms that had litigation against the Garden. So I am a Knicks fan. I am not a Jim Dolan fan.
It seems like they can now spot Charles Oakley and maybe allow him in the building again. So hopefully we're over that.
He was welcome
drama.
with open arms in San Antonio.
Yeah, he was.
All right, so that's it. That's a wrap on show 159, David?
160.
160, wow. Like round numbers. So thank you to our guest again, Jim Small. Thank you to you, David. Most of all, thank you to our listeners. If you like what you hear, smash that like button, subscribe, follow, share. We are available wherever podcasts are offered, and you can always find us on dpandmcgee.com. Until next time, he's DP, I'm McGee, and we'll talk soon.